Paul, great to be with you.
Very good. And, following Thanksgiving Day, I'm sure that a lot of people had a good time. Our family certainly did. But there's a sentiment right now that there's a lot of problems still in the world. And we want to talk a little bit about, one solution that we might have come to is if we had a little bit more truth-telling and a little less government regulation on what we're saying. They're talking about all kinds of nonsense. Let's make sure that there's no disinformation. The issuers of the most disinformation in the history of mankind has come from the government, and that gets worse constantly. So every time the government comes in and says something about, well, we have to regulate this disinformation, they're telling lies and they're doing things, and we have to straighten them out. So we turn to our politicians who are nihilists, and they don't even believe in truth. So that's released, and that's where we are today, and trying to figure out, exactly what will happen and what the motivations are in the Middle East. That'd be a miracle if we heard the truth about that. Ukraine, the truth does come out eventually. I mean, it's sort of working its way out in Ukraine because it was such a disaster. It's some of the attention now is given, the Middle East between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But, to me, Chris, a little bit of truth popped out. I don't know whether it was the Thanksgiving sentiment, but all of a sudden they exchanged prisoners. Well, if people could do that, and all of a sudden exchange these prisoners for their own, reasons. But why can't they do that and just say, well, why don't we quit bombing and killing each other for another year? And maybe they could get used to it. But anyway, I think that there is a systematic approach, an attack on our freedom of speech, the distortion of what speech is, and that the government, when they really want to make it fair, and make sure everybody has freedom of speech, believe me, they're a long way off from the strict interpretation of our First Amendment.
Very good, Dr. Paul. Yes, you are correct, of course. Massive lies depend on mass broadcasting, and we have that today. And as you point out, the biggest misinformation people are the politicians and the media. And they work together. They put out the same narrative, this big narrative that they broadcast out. And unfortunately, many people still uncritically accept it. It's like they go to the TV to get their marching orders. And then the usual suspects come out, the big corporations and Hollywood and major sports teams. And then the celebrities are rolled out. So how this works should become obvious to more and more people as time goes on. But we have an advantage, people who at least seek the truth, because that only needs a single person. You don't need mass broadcasting. If you think back to the COVID, mass disinformation put out by politicians and the media, it was one governor down in Florida who threw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. His state shined like a bright star while everybody else was self-imposed suffering. And Elon Musk is another one, him buying Twitter for $44 billion. That shows you how much the truth costs. And believe me, that was not planned because they're going after him like they went after DeSantis. So that's their Achilles heel, is people speaking freely. And if you go on to X, formerly Twitter, you will get every side of the argument. Whether it was COVID, Israel, Ukraine, you will see all sides. Elon Musk is, for the most part, and I don't know what the future holds, but he is living up to his free speech promises. And the truth does not come just from one person. That's what's so tough for the authoritarians. It comes piecemeal. This guy says something, this girl says something, and it all fits together, and then the official narrative just collapses. So the authoritarians can't just go after one person. Truth is, it comes out decentralized, which is another plus for us. So, we should always stay positive. The authoritarians will never stop. They always want to box everyone in, but the truth is on our side.
I think it's easy for us to defend the argument that it's usually government that's the greatest offense to our rights of freedom of speech. But then when you hear that the UN is getting involved, you really should have to stop and worry, because they're hardly going to be the group of people, the authoritarians, that are going to come and rescue us and protect us with our ability and our desire and our right to talk and say each other and have opinions. But no, there's a move on. COVID onward has been very bad for the protection of speech, except for the fact that more and more people are waking up, even though they're handicapped, in that the people who want to perpetuate the lies and punish the people who are telling the truth, I still think there's more people waking up. But the Zero Hedge had an article yesterday. I want to just quote a little bit from it. It said, "Inside the UN plan to control speech online." Oh, that sounds like a good idea. A powerful United Nations agency has revealed a plan to regulate social media and online communications while cracking down on what it describes as false information. I wonder who will be the judge of false information and other conspiracy theories. In some ways, everybody's conspiring for something. If you get together in the most innocent, honest, positive way of getting 6 people together and start talking, how are we going to shift the momentum away from tyranny toward liberty? Oh, no! Put him in prison. He's a conspirator. We can't let that happen. So this is just terrible. I just think that warmongering and the violence in the world and the attacks on personal liberties has been led by government. That's why government's going to be around for a while longer, and it's been here for a long time. But at the same time, the government is the culprit. And yet they're the ones who are supposed to solve this problem and make sure that people don't obey this. But that's power. I think that, and I've said it for about every year that I've even thought about politics, you need the United Nations, and we can date so many bad things happening since 1945 and the opening up of the door, even the boundaries that they fought over in the Middle East, 20 years ago and lasting for 10 years, and the fighting that's going on in the Middle East. So much of that has been artificially created, by the UN edicts, and I think that is where the real problem is. But the big problem with that is, if you say that, we become vulnerable, and they can do damage. And I think everybody is vulnerable for people being canceled and punished for this, and that's what's happening right there. There's more and more of that, and I think as the people wake up and they feel more on the defensive, I think that is what is happening right now with the disgust that our society in the United States has, against the current administration. But it's much broader than that. To work with the idea that, it's those 10 people who run the Democratic Party, they've caused all the problems, economics and curtailing of our liberties. Foreign policy has been supported by both parties, monetary policy, deficits, all of that is bipartisan. So it's a lot bigger than saying, the election next year is going to solve all our problems. Well, it could be helpful, and we should do what we can to help. But we shouldn't be naive and think that we don't have to continue this educational process of waking people up and to get them to understand the value of understand what personal liberty is all about. Chris?
Excellent, Dr. Paul. Yes, the UN, to me, they're just a bunch of people that sit around, they come up with totalitarian schemes, and then it gets public relations, a lot of public relations. Their schemes are always way out in the future, 2040, 2050. I mean, life changes so fast. Anyone can make stuff up about 2050. I could do that, but they do it and they have a PR department. I don't. So that's what they do. By the time 2050 comes around, nobody's going to remember what was said back in 2023. But in the end, thank goodness, the UN is toothless. They have no army. They have no taxing power. Each country must submit individually. So the people in those countries have to go along with it. And if a country refuses, they become the Florida. they become the one that proves that the UN scheme is nonsense. So again, you only need one to show, show the truth of the matter, and that's why all of these schemes of trying to get everybody in the world to go for this one idea is fruitless. It's a fool's errand. But they never stop. They're always coming up with something new, whether it be climate, whether it be gas stoves, you name it. They always have something. I guess it gives them something to do. But like Dr. Paul says, we have something to do too, and that's just to point out the nonsense of their ideas. A lot of people, as conservatives, are afraid of the UN, as if they're the Communist Party is going to take over the world. I'm more afraid of the conservative foreign policy than the Toothless UN. The conservative foreign policy, they're already out in the Middle East again. That's scary. So forget about, you always keep an eye on the UN, but don't have the fear that they're, under everyone's bed.
Very good. They criticized us severely for any of us during COVID, suggesting that they were after power and control and that they would eventually use our passports. And there is a lot of that activity still going on, even though the people have rebelled and they softened a little bit. But the idea is still there. And now there's a plan to talk about the next goal is COVID is not doing so well as far as being the motivator to get what they want, but certainly a global weather report and all this nonsense on radical environmentalism, it's still alive and well. But now they're suggesting that everybody has every individual should have a control and a message, and you have a number that you have to have, and it'll be controlled by your passport, and they're weighing every individual how much carbon you're allowed to be involved in, and this is really crazy that people would buy into this. If you just think of the amount of effort, well, on from their viewpoint, that's good. We have to know everything. They say experts suggest that individuals should currently limit their carbon emissions to 2.3 tons per year. Well, that sounds like a lot. That wouldn't be a problem, would it? Except that it's the way you measure it. There's a lot of carbon dioxide, right, and most of it's beneficial. And they did this, and but they need a larger number. What they really want is up to 15 tons. So they want a tremendous increase. It will practically and totally limit every individual, because everything they did, they say, oh, well, that's energy. Anything with energy would be burning up, and that would be your carbon number. But that carbon number, if they had their way, will be on passport. I mean, it is the worst ideas for people who believe in liberty, and really a vehicle that, the way I see it, Chris, this is just another way of controlling people and advancing the cause of the elitists, globalists that cannot stand the idea that somebody could personally take care of themselves better than the government, and they would be a lot happier and a lot freer.
Exactly, Dr. Paul. And it reminds me of the vaccine. They really have shown who they are. After the vaccine passports, you couldn't travel without, or go anywhere. You go get a hot dog at the store without showing the person that you're up to date. So that's what they wanted for us, and that failed. And this whole carbon thing, they have no idea how massive something like that is with energy and measuring it. And it's disappointing to see the big tech companies. I remember they were doing those contact tracing apps. I mean, give me a break. You guys have such great technology that could be used for the good of mankind, and they're just catering to delusional totalitarianism. What a waste of time those contact tracing apps were. Now they're going to have carbon apps. It's total nonsense in my mind. They have no idea how big such an endeavor is, and you're dealing with bureaucracy who can't, even fix a pothole. They're going to measure everybody's carbon. But, so they're showing that they have these delusions of grandeur. And I'm not really that worried about it. other than people believing it, and there are many people that even push for it. But it's really just a huge waste of time.
If they're talking seriously about it, at least the information comes out because, once again, they want to give more power to UNESCO, the United Nations, to do this and carry out this collection of data, and then having all this extra control. And UNESCO wants it, but it wants to be implemented by all governments, not just individuals, all governments, all regulatory authority, civil society, and platforms themselves. So it is so monolithic. And once again, maybe we could say it's so insane. This ought to wake some people up. There's a limit to how gullible the people are and should be. So exposing this is good, not so much because tomorrow they're going to have this, because I think people are going to wake up before that happens. But I think the most important thing, and I keep talking about, getting back to people understanding what the spirit of liberty is all about, because you can't detail it as much as just having understanding what liberty really means. He said in this article also, it says, in particular, the UN agencies aim to create, quote, an internet of trust. Yes, sure. They'll do a real good job of making sure everybody trusts them. People don't trust the government now like never before, so they're going to do that. But this internet of trust created by UNESCO will target all the misinformation, all those people making up stories, disinformation just to cover all their quarters, hate speech. Hate speech. All you have to do is have an artificial, subjective definition of hate because he looked away from me when I was sort of talking. That was a hateful look he gave me. It's so bad. And all conspiracy theories, I think all theories are conspiratorial. Because you make plans. Anytime you make a plan, what they're saying is anytime you have an idea that will undermine the authoritarianism of a certain group of people who are trying to run the world through globalist ideas, they think that is the most important thing they do. But the theories and the talking and the conversation, are the ones that should be protected, but that's the ones they're after. If you're talking about the government and that you have to curtail government, that's the difference. And that is I believe that in the last couple hundred years we've had a taste and an understanding of what liberty is all about. I think it's been greatly diminished in the last 100 years, but it doesn't mean it's dead. I don't think you'll ever kill it. There will always be a remnant who will know about and read about and develop and progress with it on the concepts of the importance of individual liberty and individual responsibility. And that's what we have to keep going. But I was thinking, Chris, a little bit about the presidential campaign going on. I wonder if any of the candidates might give us a hint on how they would handle this problem. And I was thinking about one that's getting a lot of attention right now, Nikki Haley. She's very popular, and they say this is her week, her month. We're going to concentrate on her. Maybe we can get her out and maybe she could be president instead of Kamala Harris. And that's what they're trying to do. But quite frankly, Chris, I don't think that's going to lead to much of a solution.
No, and God forbid. I mean, when you hear Nikki Haley speak about foreign policy and just about anything else, it's cringeworthy. And we're talking about freedom of speech on this show, and of course she wants everybody registered. You want to speak on social media, you got to register yourself, show who you are, and for what reason? I mean, our country was founded by people who used fake names. When it comes to power, there are times where people have to use fake names. And when I go on social media and I see a video from Gaza or from Ukraine from a person that's there and they're not using their real name, I really don't care what their real name is. They're showing me what's happening there, So it's nonsense, but they want to identify everybody. And again, I think that's impossible too. And she's not the only one. You have the governor of New York, Hochul, saying her state's providing tools for students to combat misinformation. I mean, where were those tools when she was saying that God wants everybody to get the vaccine? You know, that was as big of misinformation as she could have put out. And she's fighting misinformation. So it's funny, the people that are championing this misinformation are the ones that have proven themselves to not be reliable sources of information. Maybe before COVID, they would have had a shot with this, but I think COVID soured so many people that this, misinformation coming from these people, from the government, from the media, who's going to believe them and go along with this? And Ukraine just added another layer on top. Ukraine is running. Putin's going to take over Europe, and it was all nonsense, of course. Again, so they have an uphill battle trying to convince everyone that the government should know everybody and monitor what everybody says.
A lot of people recognize now that when somebody is shouting and blaming their political opponents or whoever of doing something wrong, that individual who does the most screaming are the ones who are the most guilty. And I think you were leading us to that point. They're the ones who are guilty themselves in campaigning. The people who are shouting, they stole the election, and they're want to bring the world down. They're most likely the ones who are the most guilty of doing it because it seems like they understand it better. Not that there's too much trustworthiness in government per se. There are some certainly real experts in lying and perpetrating their power and authority that they have. But no, back to Governor Haley. When she left the United Nations, the stories in the newspaper said that she had no money, she was broke, but she got a job immediately with Boeing. And she was there for a short period of time and did well, financially. And she's made a couple dollars since then. So all of a sudden things change, and but her attitude, her philosophies will probably change a little bit too, because she was a United Nations ambassador, and yet they haven't called me ever to be the UN ambassador, but she was the UN ambassador. But now she's running for president, and one vow, Haley vows to defend the UN as soon as possible. So what are the odds of that being very sincere or able to happen? But that is what happens. They just go and say what they think will get them another vote or another dollar. Chris, do you have a statement?
Yes, I will close, Dr. Paul, saying that our founders, as imperfect as they were very, very smart, especially with the Bill of Rights. When you look at that first and second, those are huge. And perhaps those two will save our nation. As long as we have the ability to speak, the truth will get out there. As long as we have the ability to defend ourselves, we will be able to fend off tyranny. Thank goodness, Americans, there are, 400 million guns in this country. If that didn't exist, there's no way I can prove this, but I have a feeling that our country would have been steamrolled a long time ago. But that acts as a major, major restraint. So thank goodness for those freedom of speech and the Second Amendment. And as long as we have those two, we have a fighting chance against the totalitarians.
Wonderful. Our title today was Free Speech, the Great Enemy of the Empire of Lies. And I believe that the truth does win out in the end, but it takes so long and so many people suffer from it. And that's why prevention is so much better than coming up with some way of stopping a war. Just think of the nonsense going on and has gone on. And as we're winding down one war, maybe in Ukraine, we're stirring another or participating in another, and have had something to do about the Middle East war right now. But then there are other senators well versed in foreign policy. Let's go and bomb Iran. I mean, it never stopped. And I think that the biggest problem is they come from a point of view where they might have a tinge of what the higher law meant and means, but they really don't believe in it, because the people wouldn't be starting the war. The people who die and suffer. Do you think the people in the Middle East, whether it's in Israel or in Palestine, the Palestinians, it's not those people that died and young people. It's a military people. It's the leadership in countries that start these wars, and unfortunately, it's constant. And our military-industrial complex has so much to say about our foreign policy, and that's where our real problem is. And that's why I think if there's more thinking about what a higher law is all about, because it's going to be an individual. Finally, the higher law impinges enough people to speak out, and they demand, we want our freedom of speech and we want peace, bring our troops home, end the war. And that's natural law, and higher law that's insisting on us coming to our common sense. And I think it's very true that it's well known that truth is treason in an empire of lies. When we live in an empire of lies, so it is very close to treasonous. I imagine. Well, it really is. Think about the people who have suffered about January 6th, and now it's turning out that the videos are showing that there were a lot of lies told about that. And essentially, insurrection. Those are lies. Truth is treason. And that's what it is. They're saying it is treason, and many people suffer from it. But we need clarity on this, and it can't be provided by the United Nations. It can be provided only by individuals sincerely looking and seeking the truth, realizing that it is liberty that will bring us the maximum amount of peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.